Hello Summoners and welcome to another ProGuides video. I'm Zyrene and today we'll be talking about 10 changes we need to see happen in Season 11. In an ever-changing game like League, there are constant additions, subtractions, and adjustments made in an attempt to keep the game fresh. But Riot doesn't always hit the mark. These are some of the changes we think Riot could make to actually drastically improve the quality of life for League players, rather than making changes for the sake of making changes. The first change I want to talk about is lowering overall damage in the game as a whole. If you've played League since the beginning, you know where I'm coming from on this one. Compared to League's earlier years, damage is completely off the charts. And it's not just bursty mages and assassins killing ADCs that we're talking about. Supports can practically solo kill ADCs in the lane phase. Tanks can assassinate squishies in mid-game, and once you make it to 6 items, even full tank builds can't stop champions like Malphite and Mundo from being melted in seconds when they're focused down. While explosive fights can be fun to watch, they should be the result of teams pulling the trigger with perfect timing, lining up those AoE ultimates to hit sick wombo combos. Instead, most of the time in modern League of Legends, outside of play at the top, it's just a matter of whose team does more damage in the sloppy blunder of a team fight that happens around objectives. And when I say all of the damage needs to go down, I mean all of it. No more of the cutting back on early game for higher late game or vice versa. We need all offensive stats on either champions or items or both trimmed down just a bit, so we can get back to a more skill expressive gameplay where you actually get to press your buttons. Like I said, this is the first and most important change I'd personally like to see is damage being lowered, since that gives a lot more room for other creative changes which we could see come in as a result. But I want your thoughts on it too. Today's question of the day is, what change would you like Riot to give us this season? Whether it's an extra ban, remove autofill, delete Yuumi, or something else entirely, let us know your answer in the comments below. Now, let's get back into it. Playing directly off of the last suggestion, it would be nice to see the tank class as a whole get an overhaul. In modern League, most of the successful tanks are generally champions that can engage with crowd control and then disrupt the enemy backline with a mix of constant crowd control and decently high damage for such a durable character. Then once the game goes super late, their damage falls off and they get completely melted. I'm not saying all champions can just burn through tanks, but the vast majority of compositions have 1 or 2 champions in them that are capable of taking them down. To me, this is all wrong. Looking at earlier seasons of League and most other games, the definition of a tank is usually something along the lines of tons of crowd control, engage, and high durability. This problem goes back to damage being too high in the game. In current League, if you can't threaten the enemy team as a tank, you're basically useless. This is exactly why Rel flopped on her release. When compared to the other tanks in bottom lane, she's a bit more durable and offers a lot of disruption, especially with her unique team fight-centric ultimate. But since she does no damage, she can be completely ignored, and during laning phase. And that means that her ADC is basically left in a 1v2 in most matchups. But if all damage in the game was lowered, tanks could actually survive in extended team fights. It'd be easier to design them to play like Rel. Take Malphite for example. Imagine his damage being much lower, but his E having a bigger radius and lower cooldown. This would give him the role of debuffing enemy auto attackers to help cut down on enemy damage in a more niche tactical way than just flash one-shotting the enemy ADC or serving as a knockup bot for Yasuo. And that's just one champion in the tank class. Other champions could be given more disruption, more crowd control, or other tools to provide utility. And this isn't really just limited to tanks. In a world where pretty much every mage can burst you from 100 to 0, that's not much room for utility-based champions mid. This is definitely a change that would take a lot of work, but it's one that I think would make the game a lot healthier. Before we move on to the next entry, I'd just like to take a quick second to remind you guys to be sure to sub to the channel. It helps us out a ton, and if you love our content like this, or our regular meta series, it helps you make sure you never miss out on an upload. The next thing we need to see changed is sustain and healing in runes. Over time, League has become less and less skill expressive in the lane phase, mostly because of how many ways Riot has built in training wheels via runes. You can't really reap your reward of punishing an opponent for a misplay if said opponent is running runes like Fleet Footwork, Taste of Blood, Ravenous Hunter, Second Wind, or Biscuits. And to be brutally honest, these runes just give a handicap to players who are otherwise too unskilled to actually make it through the lane phase without all of the free healing. There isn't as much to say on this topic as the previous ones, but with sustain being gone, mistakes would be more punishing, and better laners would have a better shot at securing a lead, and actually using their gap in skill to carry early game. I'm not saying to entirely remove all options for sustain in the game, but it shouldn't be available in 4 of the 5 trees, and it shouldn't be such a reliable way to get a second chance after you mess up. But that's just my opinion, so if you think that's wrong or you have anything to add, feel free to let us know in the comments below. We really do love to see what you guys have to say about these things. And honestly, I'm personally in the camp of I would get smashed by ADC players. I don't play ADC as much as I used to, and I don't mind the feeling of messing up and sitting there going, man, I'm bad, and I should feel bad. And just having this ADC player just ADC gap me. And that's probably why I play more jungle anyway. On a very similar note, the next change we want is to see some sort of nerf to the ridiculous healing you can get from items. Picking up healing items should be an option or a path you take in certain situations, but at the moment, it's what makes some champions so disgustingly overpowered. Take Olaf for example. Riot is nerfing his W a bit next patch, but what really makes him such an overpowered champion is just how well he's able to really utilize Gore Drinker. Since he can't be crowd controlled with his ultimate up, he can always use it at the last second to heal practically to full HP in the middle of a team fight. And Olaf isn't alone. Almost all bruisers that don't go Stridebreaker use Gore Drinker just due to how much healing it gives. And Gore Drinker isn't the only problem in this field. Ravenous Hydra is another item that gives an insane power spike the second it's acquired, because it completely eliminates any chance at taking a good trade against the champion that bought it. Either you kill them in an all-in, or you watch them heal up all the damage you did to them off of a single minion wave. On top of that, since it gives Omnivamp, it has insane synergy with certain champions like Katarina and Fiora, leading to them easily healing through all the damage that can be thrown at them in a team fight. Bloodthirster is the last item that will lump into this problematic healing category. Since it gives crit and comparable AD to other purchases, there's pretty much no reason to not pick this up in your build as a marksman. So what do all 3 of these items have in common? Well, like I said before, they basically eliminate the need to make any choice in items, since they all already have comparable damage to other items related to them, but also provide a lot of healing. So there's never a reason for a champion that builds the item to even think about other choices. Cutting healing would make the items less appealing, but I think the more logical idea is to just readjust the items so that healing and survivability is their main appeal, with the damage aspect being toned way down. Taking our focus away from the gameplay itself, a huge change that I'd love to see is better champion accessibility. At the very least, champions should be a lot cheaper than they currently are. But what I'd really like to see is all champions being unlocked. It doesn't have to be as soon as you install League, but maybe by the time you reach level 30 or 50, you should be able to have access to everything. I'm sure Riot has their reasons. Maybe they think it's worth it because people will spend real money on RP to unlock champions, or maybe it's because the grind to get more blue essence to unlock the next character keeps people going. But I think having all champions unlocked would be a much better way to get players into the game. It might be overwhelming, but speaking from experience, when I first started playing League, nothing in the rotation interested me that much. As a result, I just played a couple of games here and there, but once Cassiopeia came into Free Week, I spammed her a ton, and immediately unlocked her once Free Week was done. I think being able to find a champion you truly enjoy early can really increase the chances you stick with the game. And if keeping champions locked is really a money thing for Riot, something they should consider is that what if owning all the champions means having more champions to buy skins for during events? And one last selling point, you'd no longer have to deal with the frustration of asking your teammate with first pick to grab an OP champion that's open, only for them to reply, "I don't own it," and then see the champ slip into the enemy's hands. Next, I'd really like to see some changes to Practice Tool. For years, Riot refused to implement Practice Tool, but eventually they yielded. And while it has been a very useful tool for practicing combos and testing certain things, it's still pretty limiting. The biggest change I'd like to see is multiplayer Practice Tool, or at least the ability to invite just one person to the lobby, whether it's to see something about the lane phase or a certain matchup, or test how strong 2 duelists are when fighting in a vacuum. It opens a lot more options than just hitting target dummies. It would also be nice if you could set enemy champions with certain levels. This allows you to set up precise scenarios to figure out that you may otherwise never really be able to perfectly replicate again. Maybe you disagree with your duo on whether or not you could have actually killed your opponent if you had turned. Having both of these changes would allow you to go into a practice tool with your duo, test it out, and reach a conclusion rather than bickering about it. Some people would argue that this takes away from the fun of figuring it out in live games, but honestly, you can get the answer by doing math. A lot of math. A lot of math that would take a lot of time. If anything, this is just a shortcut that would greatly increase the quality of life. But until Riot actually makes the change, if you want another shortcut that can save you a ton of time, be sure to head over to ProGuides.com, where our Challenger level coaches can help you quickly improve your skills. There's no time like the start of a new season to level up so your climb can be a smooth ride to the top. The addition of voice chat to League has been something that's been requested for years. And while Riot finally did add it to pre-made parties, the only time I ever really use it is when Discord is down, since I already have my friends added there. What many vocal players, myself included, have wanted is the option to opt into voice chat with their team at the start of the game. Not only would this give players a better chance to coordinate, but the vast majority of people are much less prone to being toxic when they're actually in a voice chat with someone. Since it would be an opt-in option, nothing would change for those that don't want to do it. Some players already invite teammates to random Discord servers just for solo queue games, though that's more so a thing in Masters Plus lobbies where many players already know each other to some extent. I'm not sure why Riot is so stubborn about this one, especially since another one of their games, Valorant, has it. Moving back to actual in-game mechanics, I'd like to see one big change to the Baron buff. As it stands, Elder Dragon is worth a lot more than Baron. Rather than just laying on more AD or AP, the change I'd like to see is Baron applying Grievous Wounds effect. We can already build into 60% Grievous Wounds via items, so for this build to be really impactful, it'd be nice if it was something like an 80% cut to all healing. We already talked about how crazy healing is due to runes and items, so a change like this would add a way to overcome all of that, giving your team an edge in teamfights without it being just a block of stats to roll over your enemies. This would also be a huge buff to any champion that opts for split pushing over grouping with Baron, since most side laners are bruisers with a lot of healing, like Aurelia or Fiora, and this gives you a way to beat them in a 1v1 and actually threaten towers. Moving on, let's talk about something that already is in a good state. The jungle plants added a new layer of strategy to the game when they came out. Using Scryer's Bloom at the right time can help you know when it may be a good time to invade, tells you what the enemy jungle path may be, or can help secure vision control around objectives. Blast Cone opens up gank paths, serves as an emergency exit when an invade goes bad, and in teamfights, it can give immobile champions ways to reposition without blowing flash, and it gives you a way to troll your team. But also the Honey Fruit. Well, they give sustain? It's not necessarily tactical, but it can give you the HP and mana you need to stick around in lane or an impending fight. And so with all that said, rather than a change to an existing mechanic, this entry is about adding on to it. I'd like to see a new jungle plant. This is a bit more of an open-ended one, since like I said, the plants are fine as is, but it would be fun to see another added to the game. One idea is to add a jungle plant that serves as a trap. It could give you an item that you can plant that would damage, root, or reveal your opponent when they step on it. The theme of thorns, vines, and spores all respectively play to those effects, and fit nicely into being things that you would expect to find in the jungle. Or maybe there could be a plant that would spawn late into the game that provides a buff, temporary or permanent, that you can secure for those crucial late game team fights. These are just a couple of ideas that we thought of, but feel free to let us know down in the comments if there are any fun things that you've come up with. The final change I'd like to see this season is for towers to be buffed, in one way or another. In pro play and at the highest level of solo queue, if a player suspects they're going to be dove, they can usually rely on their team to play accordingly, by either countering the dive or making a play on the other side of the map. But for the vast majority of players, even knowing you're going to be dove isn't really enough, as most random junglers aren't likely to break their path and come to back you up. As far as what buffs could be done, the simplest option would be to increase their damage early game. Maybe for each plate that's still alive, the tower does more damage. Or another more complex change would be to make it so that towers have slightly increased range against champions with their aggro, making it harder to get out of the turret's range before dying in early dives. You shouldn't be completely immune to danger just because you're playing under a turret, but it'd be nice to give you a better shot at least picking up a return kill if you're playing the dives well when you're being 2v1 bullied as your jungler full clears for the third time in a row. And that wraps things up for 10 changes we need to see in Season 11. I hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to let us know what change you want to see this season down in the comments below. And one last thing before you go, feel free to check out our Discord. The link for that is in the description box below. We would love to have you as part of our community. I can't wait to see you guys back in the next video. But until then, good luck on the Rift, stay safe, and wash your hands. See you guys.